Hello everyone, Dragonfire here, and I thought I would do a video that I haven't I haven't talked much about the NBA on my channel. I did one video on the NBA a couple of years ago, but I am a huge NBA fan, and as anyone who's followed my channel for a while knows, it's a variety show pretty much with me. So sometimes I do music, sometimes I do movies, sometimes I talk about professional wrestling or whatever it might be, whatever I, you know, feel like talking about, basically. Um, but sometimes I do series on my channel, and today this is going to be the first in a series. Now, like I said, I am a huge NBA fan. I do follow the NBA. Right now, the NBA finals are going on between the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that is still ongoing uh, at the time of the recording of this video. But what I wanted to do today is um, I want to give my picks for the top Atlanta Hawks of all time. And this is going to be a series where I go through each team franchise by franchise. This is the first one in this series. So this is going to be, yeah, the top teams of, um, of each franchise. So we're going to start off with the Atlanta Hawks today. Um, they have been around since 1946. They were actually originally an expansion franchise in the NBL, that's the National Basketball League, before joining the NBA in 1949. Um, but so, yeah, the entire history of the franchise is eligible for my list. I'm not saying that I'll actually have any players from the 1940s on my list, but anybody who ever played for them is eligible, and I'm picking who I believe the top players are. I just want to say I know that the NBA community on social media, on the internet, so forth, can be a very toxic place, and I'm not about that being toxic, and I'm all for people giving their opinions. I'm just not for people like, being angry and mad and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to say also that if you're one of those NBA fans that is part of the We Done with the 90s movement or whatever you want to call it, um, then you're probably not going to like my list. I'm not going to for the all-time team, I'm not going to pick only players who played in the past 25 years. Okay? Um, it's going to be it's going to include players from the 90s and before. So this is going to be an old head list, but it's also going to be, a new head, if you will. Or anybody is eligible. I'm just putting together what I think is the best team possible, and I'm taking into account what they contributed to the team and how much they helped the team win. I think the goal of any franchise is to win, so that players, from time periods when the team was actually good, are going to be taken into account in this series. Um, the more they were winning, that helps. So it's a combination of like team success and statistics and accolades and longevity. How long did they play for the team? I'll only be counting like what a particular player did for a particular franchise. So something that they did when they played for a different team, you know, won't affect how they score in this particular franchise for better or worse. It won't affect it. It'll only be like with each team what they did with that team. So tonight we're doing the Atlanta Hawks. That's you know only what this particular player did with the Atlanta Hawks, not what they did with some other franchise. Um, will affect whether or not they made my list. Um, okay, so first off, my list is going to start off with a starting lineup. Then it's going to have a six man, and then it's going to have up to 15 players for each team. Minimum of 10, maximum of 15 for each of these teams that I'm doing, um, depending on the franchise. Um, and what I felt like putting on the list. And then I'll also be naming who I think is the best player in franchise history, or maybe a more appropriate term rather than best is greatest in terms of what all they contributed to the franchise as a whole. And it's going to be, a combination of individual success as well as team success. But team success is going to heavily measure into how I view these teams because the goal of any franchise is to win, and so the player that helped them win the most is gonna factor heavily into that. Um, all right, so who am I picking for the Atlanta Hawks? Okay, first up, I got to go with my center, Dikembe Mutombo. 7'2" center. He was a defensive specialist. Um, I believe he still holds. I think he for the Hawks franchise as a whole, he has the highest block per game average. I think when I looked up the statistics, um, and he arguably spent his prime years in Atlanta as a member of the Atlanta Hawks. Um, Yeah, I mean, he did have good years with the Denver Nuggets as well as with the Philadelphia 76ers, but probably his prime was there with the Atlanta Hawks. So I'm picking him for my starting center. There was some tough competition with Tree Rollins, uh, but I'm having Tree Rollins come off the bench as a backup. So yeah, I chose Dikembe Mutombo. Um, for my starting center for the Atlanta Hawks. Now, um, next up on my list is the power forward Bob Pettit, 6'9". So yeah, he played center slash power forward in his day, and I feel like he could have played power forward in any era in NBA history, really. Now, some people are going to be mad at this pick because it was so long ago. But again, I told you already, I'm, everybody's eligible for this, and he is my pick for the greatest Atlanta Hawk of all time, and that's Bob Pettit. And he's going to be my starting power forward. I know another name. There's another name that gets brought up, usually who played more recently than Bob Pettit. Some people would pick him as the greatest Atlanta Hawk of all time, but I'm going with Bob Pettit. And yes, he did play for the franchise in the 50s and 60s, mostly when they were in St. Louis, and he did win an NBA championship with St. Louis. I guess his rookie year they were still the Milwaukee Hawks, but later became the St. Louis Hawks. But yes, the only championship in franchise history in 1958. Bob Pettit was the best player on that team. He probably would have won Finals MVP, but that award had not been invented yet at the time. So, but he is a two-time regular season MVP. He helped the Atlanta Hawks go to the NBA Finals 4 times in 5 years. 4 times in 5 seasons, yeah, uh, that they were um, that they were in the NBA Finals, um, and so he had a level of dominance as the best player on the team at the time. And again, he's my pick for the greatest Hawk of all time. The greatest player in Hawks franchise history. Uh, yeah, two-time MVP, one-time NBA champion, 4 times he led his team to the NBA Finals. Uh, just a dominant player from the mid 50s to the mid 60s, one of the greatest players of that time period. I He won Rookie of the Year his first season. Um, he had two regular season MVPs. Who knows if the NBA MVP had been awarded his rookie season, he might have three. He was that good as a rookie. Um, he did win Rookie of the Year. Um, so yeah, Bob Pettit, I think he's still the Hawks' all-time leader in rebounds, even though he's been passed in points. He's the second highest points, total points in Hawks franchise history. But again, he was a two-time MVP. He, you know, led them to a championship. So how do you not pick Bob Pettit as the greatest player in Hawks history? The only excuse some people will have is they'll say, "Well, I don't count that stuff. It was the 50s and 60s. It was too long ago." But for me, he makes my list. And of course, the other player that a lot of people might contend for greatest player in Hawks franchise history besides Bob Pettit, a lot of people would bring up the name Dominique Wilkins. And I have him at my small forward. So he's still in the starting lineup. Bob Pettit and Dominique Wilkins together. He did surpass Pettit as the all-time leading scorer for the Hawks, although he had significantly less in some other statistical categories. And he never won an MVP. He never led them to a championship. Uh, but he was a great player from the mid 80s and into the early 90s for the Atlanta Hawks, early to mid 90s for the Atlanta Hawks. Um, just great player. Um, you know, some people would argue that the reason he didn't win as many individual accolades or have as much team success is because of tougher competition, or playing in the later era or whatever. But um, but still was able to do a lot with the Atlanta Hawks in the 80s and 90s. 6'8" small forward, uh, nicknamed the Human Highlight Reel, just very, very dominant scorer, and dunker, won a slam dunk contest, and so very deserving to be on the starting lineup for the Atlanta Hawks. One of the greatest players, in fact, probably the second greatest player in franchise history, in my estimation. Uh, with my shooting guard, I'm going with 6'4" Cliff Hagan. Uh, Again, this is an older player. He was a member of that championship team in '58, probably the second best player on that team next to Bob Pettit. Um, he is 6'4". I think he actually played small forward in his time, but I'm moving him down to shooting guard uh, for for this list. He's better fit for my starting lineup at the shooting guard position. Um, so yeah, I'm choosing Cliff Hagan for that. And for my point guard, I'm taking Mookie Blaylock. Just in the 90s, he was a fantastic point guard who was, you know, very, uh, you know, he was a good defensive point guard as well as offensive point guard, great passer. Um, so I'm going with Mookie Blaylock. All right, my sixth man is Lou Hudson. I'm going to try to get through these a little bit faster. I'm taking Al Horford, John Drew, Tree Rollins, Zelmo Beatty coming off the bench. And then I'm getting into some more of my personal picks. I'm doing Kevin Willis as a backup. Um, here, and Pete Maravich and Lenny Wilkens, both of whom had their jerseys retired with the Atlanta Hawks or with the Hawks franchise. Um, Pete Maravich and Lenny Wilkens, they are two players that weren't with the Hawks for very long, but they had a good impact while they were there, and that's why their jerseys have been retired. I'm also gonna take Doc Rivers, and for my final pick, my number 15, I'm going with Spud Webb. Only about 5'6" or 5'7", but he won a slam dunk contest. I think the shortest player to ever win a slam dunk contest. One of only two players under 6 feet tall to win the slam dunk contest. Anyway, getting Spud Webb in there with my final roster spot. Of course, I think right now, currently, you're only allowed to activate 13 players in any particular NBA game. You're only allowed to activate 13 players, but you can still have more players on practice squad or whatever that are still under contract with your team. So I'm allowing for up to 15 players on my list. So here it is. Again, I'll just give it to you guys. Um, so yeah, I'm doing like I said, you see my starting lineup there, and my uh, center, point guard, six man, and the remaining players on my list here. But yeah, all players, all 10 players who are in the top 10 win shares for franchise history, the Atlanta Hawks franchise history, are on my list. So it talks about like win shares, how much they contribute to the Hawks' overall success as a franchise. So all these players are in the top 10 win shares. But yeah, um, my here's my list for the list, making a greatest team possible with the contributors to the Atlanta Hawks franchise. And yep, Bob Pettit is my pick for the greatest Atlanta Hawk of all time. All right, that is my list of the Atlanta Hawks. Stay tuned to this channel. Um, I'm going to be doing the Boston Celtics right on through the rest of the NBA. Um, so subscribe, share, like, notifications, turn those on so that you can know when I drop my video for the Boston Celtics and Charlotte Hornets and Chicago Bulls and Brooklyn Nets and all the other teams that are coming up. All right, everybody, Dragonfire out.